Right, here we are, Friday once again. It's time for API storytelling. Let me bring my friends in here and we can talk a little bit more. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Doing all right. Pretty good week. No complaints
Good.
overall. Don't have anything to kvetch about. Let me bring in Aidan.
All right.
Hey
Hey.
guys,
There he is.
how's everyone doing?
So
Doing good.
no real complaints this week. I don't have anything to complain about. I'm pretty happy and feel like I'm getting a handle on work again and oh, I did my first Breaking Changes show this week with Shutterstock. That was cool. So I'm
Cool.
feeling good about that. So no,
Very good.
good.
Very good. Yeah.
We don't have a guest this week. And then I was just thinking about various realms and what possibly we could talk about. And I wanted to throw out talking about change because I would say the context that it popped into my head isn't necessarily how I want to talk about because I know Aidan, you especially have a wealth of thoughts about change, and you too, Mike. But
Yep.
I was thinking of it in context of API evangelist and how my blog really isn't that relevant anymore from an SEO standpoint because I don't actively publish to it. Um, it still does quite a fair bit, like 5,000 page views a day of traffic. But I was just thinking about how, unless I perform on a regular basis, uh, I don't, I'm not of concern to the algorithms. And even if the articles are relevant, like Google very much focuses on the blogs or the sites that are perpetually evolving, and there are
Yep.
some archival, but like the web is really about always perpetually changing, and it's not very good at documenting what was or what is in any sort of archival way. And then that went into my daughter's doing some archival work around some Japanese history. She's got an internship this summer, so I was thinking about archival work, and so I just wanted to throw out there, like, and Aidan, you asked coming into this, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about API change, or are we going to talk about just change? And I'm game for anything, but I just like change is fascinating because I'm starting to get to the age. I don't want to talk about age because Mike always makes me feel like, so I'm getting to the point where like I'm more resistant to change, and I always loved and embraced change. But what what are your feelings on change now? I mean, not at an age related thing, Mike, but just like what are you still an embracer of change? Are you starting to get where you're like it rubs you weird, rubs you wrong?
I'll just volunteer. I love change, and I still love change. To me, change is the grist for the mill, the sand in the oyster. It change. The information is in the change, right? If it's the same, I get no information. I get no new data. So I love the entropy. I love all of that. It's definitely a challenge. And as I've gotten older, I've noticed, arcs or distance of change more. Um, I think it's changing faster, but I know enough about brains and how we record things that I think I just imagine it faster. I
Mhm.
still love change, and I always have tried, just in the API space, I've tried to actually make change a feature of the kinds of APIs and services and models and frameworks that I create, rather than making it very static. Now, I will just add, I agree with you in the web as it's conceived is lousy at exposing change, at archival, at history. It's just terrible. Things break because of the way the web is basically constructed and implemented over the internet, and I am really annoyed by that. I find myself using the Wayback Machine, the internet Wayback Machine, more and more because I want the archive, and we don't have a sane way to do that. So that's really annoying. But I love change as a feature. It's me.
Yeah, I mean, I think change is an opportunity, and it's also like a scary thing because if the wave comes and you add the right amount of energy and you point your surfboard in the right direction, like you get to a really cool new place. And if you don't add that energy, you will get crushed. And the part that makes change scary is that you do not get to control the cadence of the waves. So you just have to like always kind of be on and ready for it, because it can be really, really good, or it can set you back or pummel you or all these things. And I think, that's why folks resist change, is because it doesn't always go the way that they want it to. But at the same time, it's better to look behind you and see the change coming and figure out what you're going to do in that moment. And I say this, and obviously, like, we all want to love change. I think I love it like 2% less than I should. And I'm always trying to close the gap. But I think that we just got to be conscious of that. And that, I think, is why we have this opportunity. And also I think why we sometimes resist it, because it does require that non-consensual input of energy, and it's arranged on the universe's basis, not ours. And I think that is the part that's hard about it.
Is any of this? Yeah, go ahead, because I'm curious if any of what we're saying links or connects with what you're thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. Oh no, go ahead, Aidan.
Sorry, you guys froze, so I thought he was asking me a question, but you're good, Ken.
Yeah.
No, I was so definitely. I mean, and it was somewhat baiting, and because I actually really love change. I'm really a big fan of change, but it's in certain contexts, and there's areas where I'm getting more resistant to change. But bringing it back to APIs, I have 2 APIs that I still use that haven't changed, that I love. One is AWS S3 for storage, and the other is Pinboard for bookmarks. And the code I wrote in 2011 for both of those has never changed. Like, I've never had a break in both of my custom built solutions that use those. And those are storage of images, videos. Like, this video will go up into my S3 storage. Bookmarks to this will be stored in Pinboard and be stored. And I love that I don't have to spend time rewriting those things, because if they broke, I may not fix them, because I don't have that time in my day. And so when I think about, like my website, I'm like, most of my articles I could repost right now as today, maybe change the title, and it would be relevant. Most of the stuff I said before. And so it kind of bothers me that it isn't considered relevant anymore by the Google algorithm. And so certain change bothers me, certain change doesn't bother me. And I'm definitely getting very old guy on, change on my lawn, but it's, I still love change. And I would say, coming out of COVID, I'm starting to think about, like, what's change look like. So the other thing that I did, so speaking of blog, API Evangelist was irrelevant. Kinlane, I flushed last week. So I flushed everything back to 2007 on Kinlane, wrote a fresh blog post, and it's brand new. I don't have any of that previous content, because, kind of speaking to changes, like, my tone on API or on Kinlane for the last 5 years has really been working on Kinlane, like really fixing me, talking about me, and hyper focus on my past and my problems and issues. And to be honest, I feel like I've dealt with most of those issues. I feel really, really good about myself and who I am and where I'm going. And I don't feel that I need that journal out there publicly available anymore. Now I saved it, and I might print a little book version of it and put it on my shelf and go, this is like Kinlane 2015 to 2020. But I don't need that on the website. I don't need that indexed by search engines. I actually feel like it's kind of a liability. Now that I'm a super famous talk show host. And so, I guess for me, this comes down to, like, being able to manage change and pull the knobs and levers and have a certain agency and control when it comes to change. And so, are there ways that you guys feel like change, like, I like your wave analogy, Aidan, because it's like, I remember first time surfing and you know, like when you get slammed by a wave that you weren't like looking for or whatever, like what about change don't you like? I mean, you both said you really like change, but is there things that change that really you know, slams you and that you wish wouldn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, I had like 3 kinds of big changes happen in the last week or two. I was helping my family with a lot of stuff and a lot of work things that I'm like, my role has switched a lot because we've hired all these new people. And you know, I sometimes get mad at the universe. I'm like, but why is it all at once? It's like you could 3 waves from different directions at different times would be fine, and it would be really fun. But it's like, what? I have a friend I'm helping, a family I'm helping, and my job has completely changed. And it's like you could have maybe spaced this. Like, do you know about load balancing universe? And it doesn't. It just never does. So to me, that's the only kind of change I hate. Like I've gotten like a better attitude about it because like I've found that for some reason all of the important changes in my life happen in 3s or 4s. And I don't know if that's something about my law of attractionness or just I've gotten unlucky or whatever. But like to me, that's the thing that just it's when it happens together and it requires the same kind of like emotional or like physical or monetary or financial, all these different things that you have to put out there as energy to arrange the universe back to the way you want it to be or to catch that wave. Like that is the most stressful time when it's like, come on.
I would say, I think this is a little close to what you're talking about, Ken, is what I'm discovering is, to me, change has a distance factor to it. It literally has like a distance. So the changes that have been going on for quite a while frustrate me because I sense that distance. I can't recall or I can't remember, or it's changed so much that a good example is that this code doesn't work anymore or things like that. Those kinds of changes frustrate me. They frustrate me because, not because they're changes, but because I don't know how to deal with them. Like it thwarts me in some way. Maybe it's kind of what you're saying, Aidan. I can't do this now. It's sort of like, oh, let me go ahead and whip this up. I've got a utility for that. Oh, this utility doesn't work because one of the dependencies changed. You know, it's like, so now I have to go ahead and dig another hole and then move all that dirt to fill that hole and then go back over here and finally do the thing I was going to do. And it's like a day or two later, and I thought this was going to be easy. That's the change that frustrates me. But as I said before, what fascinates me about change is we experience change every single day. Everything around us changes, and there's like, we ignore it or it's no barrier. We work around it. There's a big detour up on a major road about 4 blocks from my house that, you know, we travel a lot. Well, that's change, you know, and we're just going to adapt and get around it. So we do this all the time. And what fascinates me is there are so many changes that we think don't affect us. We just go on with our lives until one day, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I guess I never noticed that store closed or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And how we can deal with that in other parts of our life. So what I'm noticing more than anything else, what I notice are the changes that thwart me or the ones that surprise me in some kind of way. And maybe that's what the waves are, Aidan. I don't know. Maybe that's sort of the same idea. But you know, that's me.
So when it comes to no, I lost that thought. Never mind.
Sorry.
Well, I think there's a bunch of different kinds of change. And this might be something that prompts different thoughts in you guys. I think there are these unexpected like environmental changes or sociological or technological, or market goes down. These are like those waves that you don't expect that are coming for you and you have to react to them. And there's the changes that you try to initiate in your own life for some reason, usually past knowledge that makes you think it might be better. And all of these things are fractal. Like the things that affect a human individual affect a family, which also affect a company, which affect a society. Like all of this is completely fractal. So you could apply, instead of person, you could put in company here or API or whatever. So there's the things that you're trying to change. And then you have like some way of knowing if you've gotten there or not, and it may never actually happen if you don't have the right process in place to make that change happen. And then there's the kind of changes which are like, I think they're almost like, they're like subconscious, like backsliding, like they're things that just, you thought you had changed something, and then now you're sort of find out you're in a different part of the world. It's like you're like, oh, I thought I was in the Pacific Ocean, but I'm actually in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
And everything I thought was wrong. And I have to reevaluate a lot of things simultaneously. I think that kind of change is more like everything, like the inside stays the same, but the entire outside is different, or maybe it's because the inside changes so much and then the outside looks different. So I think those are all these different. I'm articulating this poorly, but the third kind of change is when your perspective internally changes, which means you see the world differently, and then all of these other first two categories appear different to you as well. I think that's it.
The perspective is an interesting part of all of those dimensions. I would say is, I think change is super relative to me. Well, I mean, I'm sure it is to you guys as well, but it's it's how I see things, and then how, I mean, I would say part of that change that I've been going through for the last number of years is like my whiteness and white supremacy, like the of the world, was a big eye opener for me. Like there was the one cartoon I saw last week on the student walking up to the teacher and going with the Tulsa massacre, or the Tulsa, whatever you call it, the race riots. There's several different ways to describe what happened in the 1920s in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But it was walking up to the history teacher saying, "What else haven't you told me?" And so for me, like there was a heavy awakening in the last 5 years, is like, and I'm living in Oakland, so, and I'm actually doing the tour this week on the history of like the Black Panthers and stuff in Oakland. And that's part of, like, I would say, reprogramming of my view of, because my understanding of the Black Panthers was very much watching television in the 70s and 80s, and so my perspective of has changed and shifted, but it's the same history, but because my perspective changed, I'm seeking out new knowledge and new tidbits. And then my whole view of race and this city that I live in, my surroundings, I mean, all the way down to things are softening. Like it feels more like a community here in Oakland, the more of that awareness that I bring in, kind of reprogram my history and how I see the world. So my perspective has changed, and I think how Oakland feels and sounds and looks, the colors, the tone, is going to be really different moving forward, because I kind of embrace that change in a different way rather than digging my heels in. And I've encountered a few people that are like, well, I'm moving out of here. We're going up to Northern California. We're moving up to Idaho, and I would say, I feel like they're dealing with change in a different way. I don't want to say they're not dealing with change, because they're not on the same path I am. I think that's a wrong way to look at it, but like they're embracing change in their own way, and they're exiting. But I feel like if I dug my heels in like that and just held on to what I already knew and didn't embrace change and be all right with me, then it would be much more uncomfortable. I would be much, angrier. So I don't know, that went down a different road of change than I think I intended, but I'll pause.
I love that the way you started talking about this was how change is manifested in your connection to things. Things look different. Things feel different. It feels more like a community. Sounds and sights and smells. I mean, you literally went through like a list of senses, and I think I was hearing you sort of attribute it to sort of a perspective adjustment, right? So suddenly things look different, or seem. So where's the change, right? Is the change on the outside, or the change is on the inside? But I love the idea that you talked about them as connectables, as connections. Where you feel connected, how you feel connected, when you feel connected are a big part of us, right? It's kind of like it's wiring for us. Sometimes if I don't feel connected and I can't seem to find that connection, I might move, right? I might relocate. Now, that's because I have a privilege that I can, right? There are lots of situations where I cannot relocate myself. I can't relocate from this family very easily, right? That's a lot harder than just like, moving a house or flying to another place. So I think the way we deal with change is often the way we deal with connectivity, the way we're connected. And we can't, for instance, me, I can't live in a state of nervousness or stress or anxiety when I don't feel connected, when I feel threatened, or when I feel dangerous in some way. So I have to deal with it. Something has to change. And almost always that change is me, because I think it kind of goes to what Aidan was saying. There are so many things that I don't have agency for. I'm not in charge of them. I'm not in charge of the wind. I'm not in charge of the weather. I'm only in charge of this small space, and then rarely does that work well. So the change, I think, is within, and that goes to the classic meme, like, be the change you want to see, right? Mm-hmm. So the way I feel connected often has to do with my perspective, just like you talked about.
I think so. Like how I got into the whole like the storytelling based coaching stuff that we started this whole show around. Mm-hmm. Was based on this blog post I wrote a while ago. I'll send it to you guys after this, but it was about the human brain as a dissonance reduction machine. And I think like the most uncomfortable thing for pretty much anyone is to have the world on the outside not match the stories they tell on the inside. And the way you change that and reduce that dissonance is you either accommodate the new information into your existing model, or you change your existing stories, or you change your environment and get away from the stimulus that is making you realize that you or situation or country or race relations or whatever the topic at hand is not what you wanted to believe it was. And I think F. Scott Fitzgerald has this great quote. He says, the true mark of a first-rate intelligence is holding two contradictory ideas in your head at the same time and not losing your mind. And I think that is part of what actually helps people change, is because there's that transition boundary period where you are choosing to sit with two stories, the one you were raised with and the one that you pretty sure is actually the truth, or at least the truth right now, and you might learn even more and it might be different in the future. But to sit with those two things long enough for one of them to take over or for that change to happen is really hard. And most people will just make up excuses, or that's what the digging in your heels is. It's just you're accommodating the new information into your story. Well, of course they cover that up because that's what the government does. Like it's how conspiracy theories get bigger and bigger. Is like, the Rothschilds were part of it too, obviously. Like that's why, yeah. And the other thing is like radical, just like I'm going to believe this new thing, and I'm going to let that start to influence my life in other ways. That's really hard to do. And I think when you think of this world as like dissonance reduction, some of these choices start to make a little more sense. Why did that person run away from marriage, city, country, whatever? They couldn't accommodate it. And I think a lot of the there's nothing wrong in that choice. Like every situation is different. But I think there's just that's the way I've always kind of modeled this, is like the stories you tell yourself are how you're going to see the world, and you're going to need to either change your stories or you're going to change your world to match the stories, and you get to choose that. So like, Ken, you leaned into maybe the story can change. Other people go to North California or Idaho or wherever, and they find an environment where their story is a little more tenable. And that's how I kind of think of the world.
Just to jump in here, I've talked with Ken about this. There's a great book. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before here, called Innovate by Bo Lotto. Bo Lotto is this sort of, I want to say, pop psychologist kind of person. That he might be offended by that. But that's the way it is. But he has this great sort of line about the way we innovate is really by thinking creatively. And then he gets into this bit about, in order to change our future, we have to change our past. The stories we tell ourselves affect the futures that we will have, right? So I could view my past life as a repeated series of failures that will affect what I see ahead of me, right? And what I choose. I could see my past life as a series of overcoming obstacles, and that'll affect what I see around me and then my future, right? So I think it's the same sort of connection idea, and sort of what you're saying too about the stories we tell ourselves. And I think that is what changes. Now, I hadn't thought about it in terms of dissonance. I need to kind of process that, because that makes perfect sense. Because I talked about it in terms of anxiety and stress and like things I need to change. I'm too stressed out. I have to change something, is the way my brain works, right? So I think there's a lot there that I need to kind of contemplate.
Yeah,
well,
dissonance.
you just
Dissonance are. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go finish your thought.
Dissonance is a diff.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Your news stories are change logs. Aidan works very congruently with all of his projects.
I love it.
No, I like it. I mean, what you described, Aidan, is exactly what kinlane.com was for the last 5 years for me. It was processing that out in the open, which for some weird, I still can't totally understand why I needed to do it out in the open. That was a critical piece, because I wouldn't have done the work otherwise. I don't know why, but it was working through those stories.
I'm just going to say, I think that is so brave to do that. I would be so intimidated to do that. And I so appreciated your willingness, because it was helpful. I know you noticed this. It was helpful to others too, what you were doing in the open. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I just wanted to make sure.
No. I mean, I think that is part of it for me, because I have emails from people who are like, thank you. Like, people who had similar things that happened to our son Isaiah, and people who are dealing with family similar to me. But I also ran off family members who will not talk to me to this day, because I didn't mention them personally or anything, but I talked about something that they were part of in a way that I processed, and they knew it was them, and they won't talk to me anymore because I published that out in the open. So it was very, very critical for me to work through those stories and part of dumping it the last week is like, I did the work. I found that I'm not at a perfect balance with that dissonance, but like I settled so much of what I was programmed growing up, and then what I saw in the world as now that I started defining my own space. So I was settling that out in the open there. I mean, it was literally like, going home for Christmas, and goddamn government, Obama, and they're evil. They're like, killing babies, eating babies. And then I go back to DC and go to work, and I'm like in the office with Obama's team, like I'm like, wait, like, and that imposter syndrome that I struggled with for so long. And so I reconciled a lot of those battles in my head, and it took a lot to kind of settle those stories. But now, like, I feel like those stories having them there are somewhat of a dependency. So that's why I need to kind of take them and put them off the side, because I felt like having them there were going to prevent me from moving forward in the ways that this new realm that I had gotten, place I had gotten to. But I can still hold, deep conspiracy theory thoughts in my head, and banking industry. You mentioned the Rothschild, all those kind of things, and still find a peaceful place. Like, I'm actually going to start doing some more fictional storytelling around some of those things, because I found such a good place, and so I think it's really important that you think through those things. But I'm more looking towards the future now. The past, I want to keep thinking about. I think it's important that we learn from and think about our past and history and not ignore it. But I'm more on that forward motion, and I guess embracing change in that way. But for me, I like the word that you used, entropy, in this, Mike, because I'm always trying to find the signal within the noise, and for me, like, aging, like, it can just keep getting more chaotic and noisy, and the entropy levels are just super high. For me, like, the optimal moving forward is like, I don't know, a balance of entropy, because there's a certain amount of entropy that's good, I feel like, in my reality and how I see the world. But you got to have things that are also recognizable, and you got to have you got to be able to, figure things out and move forward and have confidence. So
yeah, that's exactly right. So there's this whole thing in information theory that the real information is in the dissonance, in the diff, to use Aidan's thing. Like, that's where the information is. If you just keep repeating the signal over and over again, there's no new information. So it's when it changes, it's noticing the change, and it's dealing with the change. That's one of the reasons I love change so much, is because that's where the new material is, right? So I love that a lot. So I agree with that 100%. 100%. Yeah.
I think another dimension of change, like we talked, I talked before about like the different kinds, but I think another dimension of it is the immediacy and the urgency of it. So I think like the kinds of changes that force you to face them like immediately can be really transformative in people's lives because they have no choice but to face it. I think the kind of change that is a little more challenging, but it's probably the more common kind, is the change you kind of know you need to make, or a change that's sort of like coming for a while, and you can incredibly like put it off because like you're gonna have food tonight, you're gonna have a bed to sleep in, you have a job tomorrow to go to, and a routine you can go through to get through that job and do your part. But there's so many opportunities that I think are lost to people because they don't force the change or start to embrace that dissonance or start to try to work through it. They just let it sit there, and they have a way of dealing with the fact it's sitting there instead of dealing with the thing. And it takes like 100 times more effort to deal with the thing and integrate it. But that pile can only get so big before you're not able to deal with any of it. So I think that we live this privileged life where a lot of our problems we can defer, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we get the benefit of deferring them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No. Yeah, and I think another way to look at it is that's also exactly what we're experiencing with climate change, right? We're just deferring, we don't want to face it. It's not getting any easier, but it demands an awful lot, and it's 100 times more costly or disruptive to face it than to ignore it on the short term. So I think we see lots and lots of examples of this in so many places. I thought about I was using the entropy term. That's real. I got that from Claude Shannon. He was sort of using this idea that the information, the entropic part, he called it surprisal, right? Which is kind of what Aidan was saying. The things that surprise us, the things that we suddenly have to face. Oh my gosh, I have to face this about myself. I have to face this about my life, or what I've been putting off. I mean, I think those are they can be super challenging, but they're I forget who said it, was Aidan or it was you, is like, it's an opportunity, right? Suddenly I'm presented with an opportunity. So I think the truth for me is I have too many opportunities. There are so many things that I could change. I'm a little freaked out. There's a high noise content. So it's easier for me just to say, no, I'm going to go lay down. So I don't change anything. And that's a mistake, right? So typically I've actually tried to remind myself of that sort of one small incremental thing. Well, I can't really deal with the big change. Maybe if I just, change this part, I'll be better. So I think there are all sorts of strategies for dealing with it.
Well, and trying to, I think, we were talking before we got on the show. I have a funeral to go to in a week and a half in my hometown, and see a lot of people that I don't really want to see, who don't embrace change. It's a town full of people who like, I don't feel like going to work, I'm not going to work. And that's your everyday, I don't feel like caring about environmental change. It's not real. I'm not going to think about it, and so I'm going to go back into that world, and thinking about myself and thinking, God dang it, I lost that thread on this one again. Man, I'm dropping threads on thoughts lately. It's just like, I don't know where I was going with that conversation.
Things are changing right in the midstream, right? This change happens, and then
it's a metaphor.
I love the entropy. I love the entropy part of this, trying to and the signal and the noise and the diff and trying to. Oh, that's where I was going with it. Is just walking out or getting up every morning, walking out the doorstep, and I know some of the conversations I'm gonna have with folks are like, the world's a scary place. There's like war and people are dying and raping and pillaging and like all the. I'm like, yes, but you still got to get up and go out into that world, And I was having this argument with someone on Facebook that I know I'm going to see in a couple of weeks about like, the world's a beautiful place. And like, no, it's not. Like, how can you even say that in today's climate? It's like, things are changing. Like the internet's changing everything, and it's just rapidly. And I'm like, well, wait, okay. So I'll ask you guys this: is the internet changing everything faster than ever before?
Well, this went back to what I said before about that faster than ever before part. I don't trust anymore because I certainly think that there's more change. Whether it's faster or slower, I can't imagine. I was thinking about, my grandparents grew up in the motor age, the electrical age, right? When they were born, there were nothing. There was no electricity. There were no cars. I grew up in the computing age. When I was born, the idea of a computer was they were like 3 in the world, right? So we all experienced some massive shift, I think, and I could pick other generations. Everybody can sort of pick something. I don't think it's happening any faster. I think it's harder for me to deal with, but I think that's because of me. And I think it's changing the way we deal with community. Certainly, the ability to call somebody on the phone totally changed social connections, right? The ability to ride a subway, a train, a motorized vehicle to get from, like into town to work, that totally changed society. Cars, automobiles. So I think the internet is certainly changing that, but I don't know if it's doing it any faster. That's my opinion. I think it's probably just as rapidly confusing as ever. I don't know, Aidan, what do you think?
Well, with an even shorter sample of data.
Nicely put. There he is. Very good.
It seems as though it is moving. The rate at which things are changing is in fact changing. They call that jerk in aviation. It's the rate of acceleration changing over time. So it's like just one more. It's like cubed instead of squared or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that maybe it's not changing as fast as I think it is, but I would say that the consequences of the changes are very high. Like I think that the most significant thing that's happened in our life was something that we were talking about on the show a few weeks ago, was like just the breakup of the media and how media essentially died. This old world media that we had.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that people just completely glaze over when they think about that event is that local newspapers went away. There's a reason why I was in San Francisco last week and I went to a coffee shop and I bought the New York Times. And that wasn't possible. That shouldn't have been possible. Because the stories about New York, 60 years ago were not as important, and it would take a long time to get it from New York over there. So everyone was reading their own local paper because you couldn't get the paper from the other place. And that led to a bunch of effects. One was that there was only 1 or 2 papers in town. So the only way you go from 40% market share to 50 is to be less biased and make a bigger audience, not more biased with a smaller audience. And I think today with a platform for everything is going to have a certain kind of person that it can target. And you can make a good living off of targeting one kind of person and making them more indoctrinated into that line of thought. And no one's doing it like with an evil hat on. They're just responding to their incentives, and their ad revenue went up that month when they did that thing. And we've completely changed this. Like in a small town, and I've gone to a bunch intentionally to try to see what's going on there, because I was very surprised when my home state voted a certain way in 2016. And I was like, I need to go visit other places and see what's going on here. And they could tell me more about what was going on in the White House and in the global news than they could tell me about their own town. I was like, what's good around here? Oh, I don't know. Something opened recently. How is it? How often is a new restaurant open here? Once every, I don't know, year or two. You haven't gone yet? People have opinions about the big world, but I'm guilty of this too. I don't know the last restaurant that opened in my town. I could probably tell you the last foreign policy thing that's going on. And there's something lost in that community. The fact that our characters that we share when we're having conversations are like the same set of celebrities, the same set of heroes, and the same set of villains, is actually kind of counterproductive because it makes us miss a lot of things going on around us. And I think that the idea that like there's definitely a good reason to have globalized economies. I don't know if there's a good reason to have globalized information. I'm still like TBD, and it might take me another 10 years to decide. But I think that the way the internet has come together has had a lot of upsides and a lot of downsides. And I think community is something that's important, like real touching each other, hugging each other now that it's okay, community matters. And the internet gives us a pleasant distraction to maybe not have to do that. And I don't know if that's good.
Well, and I would say, to answer my own question, what I, and share my thoughts on it is, I don't think things are changing any faster. And I read a book last year called "The Rise and Fall of American Growth." It was Robert Gordon, and his argument is the period from 1870 to 1970. So your grandparent, your parents and grandparents' generation, things truly changed more dramatically than they have from 1970 till now, and because of phone, electricity, antibiotics, like some pretty foundational things that shifted everybody's reality. And I'm still processing this one, but what to build on what you were saying, Aidan, is I just feel like the internet has uprooted some very critical anchors of our reality, and back to our perception, being local news and being one important, and kept us indoors, building on what TV started. I think kept us out of our communities and further disconnected those positive dependencies. I don't want to say dependency in a negative way. Positive dependencies on people in our community, people around us, and it allows our chain to be yanked faster and harder and in more different ways, so that it feels like the ship is rocking and changing faster than ever before, because A, we're not grounded, but B, we have this always on constant yanking thing that's like, it's changing as fast as like the world, and like, you're being left behind and you're not. So that's my
and I think also it isn't just that we get more information, but we now realize, I think we're starting to realize, with documentaries like Coded Bias and all these other things, the information we're getting is actually not very helpful. So it isn't just that there's more of it, it's we're being targeted in ways that we don't really recognize. I'm only seeing the things that some algorithm, that some people somewhere who have their own opinions about things have decided I should see, right? I don't really have, and to use, there was a line in that. Have you guys seen the Coded Bias documentary? If anybody's listening and they haven't seen it, definitely encourage you to see it. One of the lines in there was one of the challenges with selection algorithms, whether it's for news information or whether you get a loan or graduate or whatever the case may be, is the selection algorithms can be applied to us, but we can't reverse and apply those selection algorithms somewhere else. And the algorithms are almost always applied in ways that don't allow us to have knobs. Like we're just completely passively stuck consuming them. So I think one of the things I think about is, I think what's going on right now is there are more aspects of our lives that we realize we're being fed. I mean, Randolph Hearst was feeding information, during the Spanish-American War. I mean, this is not new, right? There's been feeding, but it's at a level and at a detail. Kind of goes back to your saying about these categories. You can now make a living feeding the Mike Amundsons of the world. You can actually make a profit, right? You can also create a separate channel for the Aidans and a separate channel for the Kins and make money on that. And I don't always realize that I'm being force-fed, right? So I think that may be part of what the internet's doing too, and that is it's not just going faster, but it's enabling a kind of loss of control or lack of control. I'm encouraged the fact that I'm talking about it. That tells us that we have a chance, I think.
Yeah, I think the non-trivial thing that you're getting at, Mike, that I think people are starting to figure out is that it's not just about like the number of media outlets. Like as that changes, like the media itself changes in degree and in kind. So I remember reading this paper back when I was in filmish school, trying to do that part of my life, and then decided I didn't want to do that. And it was about how there used to be 3 networks, CBS, NBC, ABC. And that meant that there were 3 things that you could watch every night. And, you know, you would come into work and there'd be a group that had watched the sports something, and there was a group that had watched the news, and a group that watched I Love Lucy. And like 3 tables is fine, but 40 tables, not so fine. But people would have the same episode of something to talk about every day. It wasn't, did you see that show on Netflix? And then you hope that one of the 20 people you interact with that day have, and you can go deep on it. It's like, we all saw that episode of I Love Lucy because it started at 7 and it ended at 8. And there's no other way we could have seen it if we liked the show. And that was
FOMO was much bigger in the 60s than it is now, because it was the only time you got to see that.
Yeah, but we also, because of that, we always had something the same to talk about, or we always saw Walter Cronkite give his nightly address, and we could have the same set of facts because Walter said it and we all watched. And they're, you know, and that's fine. You definitely don't want one state-owned media. You definitely don't want 200 independent ones either. And the right answer is somewhere in the middle, probably more towards the left of that, with like 3 or 4 independent things that can balance each other. But we don't have that anymore. And it's fascinating how, like, you know, community is as much about what we eat as it is about where we eat and the food we eat. Like, and I mean, like, information eating, like, it's what we bring in. So, you know, we all talk about APIs more than the people I interact with outside of this talk about APIs. But it's why we're able to have fun, engaging conversations that also are talking about all the other important things in life, because we use that as our grounding. And for other people in my life, I have other groundings. But I don't feel like, as a society, like, most people I meet, like, you know, like, have some completely different place they come from, that it's not like there's 3 choices, there's like 50. And that's kind of cool. But at the same time, it's like, I can't even get where you are right now. Like, we're going to have to come to this, like, other middle ground. Like, do you like ice cream? I love ice cream. Let's talk about that. Like, and then we can build up from there. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Do you like just plain flavors, or do you like fruit and chunks in your ice cream?
This new place just opened where you can get the ice cream and then they'll dip it in a flavor for you, and that flavor becomes a shell around it. It's never seen it before. It's so good.
Wait a minute, it's like sort of a waxy cover, like, kind of thing, like dipping in chocolate, but it's dipping in flavor.
But they have different flavors now, because we now know how to make anything we want taste like anything we want, even if that thing didn't exist in the real world.
But I you know what, I like this idea.
So mine is back. I'm vanilla. I'm all about vanilla ice cream.
Really?
I don't want any flavors right now. And mine is because my wife bakes amazing stuff. So she gets stuff from our CSA apricots right now. She's making apricot oatmeal bars. And so I take an apricot oatmeal bar, bowl of vanilla ice cream, put it at the top, and go, and then that's my ice cream, you know? And
well,
so
you do like fruits and flavors and stuff, but you want to be in control.
Okay. Yeah. And it's back to the knobs and levers, you know, it's like, I'm all right with things as long as I have the agency and I have the control. I just don't want to be fed, you know, and someone, give me the stories that they think I want. You know, I want control over my ice cream. I don't want chocolate swirl, vanilla, pumpkin, something, you know, that some other. I want to have that agency and control.
So to kind of put a cap on it from my perspective, what I really want to do and what I try to do is I try to give people the knobs and levers. I try not to tell people you're being played, you know, this is biased, you know, whatever, or make value judgments about things. But what I try to do is say, have you tried tweaking this knob? Have you tried changing the lever? Have you tried moving your perspective? That's what I want to give people the power to do. Even to the point of, that's the way I think about the APIs too. I want to create APIs that allow other people to do other things with them, not just consume what it is I'm putting out.
Amen. And I think that for me, that's the difference between good and bad technology, good and bad internet technology devices, like, the ability to view source and get at behind what's going on and have some control. And whether that's knowing how to do it or legally, like being able to fix and work, and things. I know Apple and others, and I've seen, that's what always freaks me out is technology closing it up so you can't get behind and you can't. And so, amen. I'm all for that. Give people the knobs and levers.
I agree. I would maybe frame it like one step to the side, though. I think for me, I really believe that if we can, like we know as humans what makes us happy, wealthy, wise, successful, loving, capable of loving. Like people have been writing about it for 5,000 years. We also know how to make our companies and our institutions better. There's a lot of great ideas for improving society, and they never really get tried. And I think to me, the thing that's like really important is to make it so that we're able to change. And that's like giving people the knobs and the levers. It's removing the Post-it note that's over the button, so that says "Do not push," and be like, you can take this off, right? Like, it's right there. Because I think a lot of stuff is as much about giving them the knobs as about taking away the thing that's blocking them. So that's to refute what Ken has behind him on the wall. I think breaking changes are something we should strive for, but we should make it so that they are safe, and that's our lives, APIs, and everything.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and including the idea that you realize if you press this knob, this is a one-way door. You're not coming back.
Yeah. This one in particular,
it's totally fine. Just know it's a one-way door. This one over here, there's a bunch of two-way doors. You can go in, test it. Seems quick and kind of weird. You can come back. Right. So the meta about all of that, enabling and empowering people to recognize what they can change and giving them the ability to do that change and kind of giving them a little bit of a preview of what the consequences might be so they can make choices, right? And then some of those things we as a community, as a group say, everybody doesn't have to go through this whole process of making this choice. Let's just sort of make it a rule, that you can't steal candy from kids. Can we do that? That's kind of how things work, right? And I think, enabling people to do that is super powerful. What frustrates me so much in a lot of my life is the inability to affect change. Now, sometimes that's simply perceived, like I don't think I can make change, but I could. But the inability to see something that I'm not happy with and think that I'm not able to change it, whether that's true or not. Those are the things that cause me frustration in life. It isn't just that things happen. It's that things happen and I think I can't change it.
I think that's a good place to end things. That's a great note to
okay. I thought we were going to fix that.
Up this week.
Everybody press the red button.
Yes, now together. Right? Take that sticky note off and let's go. I love it.
Well, that was a good one, you guys.
Great idea. Great idea.
It's gonna sit with me for
we made it
the
work.
weekend. Yeah. Thanks so much for just being open. I love talking to you guys about everything.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. Yep. This is the place where I say things I don't often say out loud. I just like in there in my head. So I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe this is not a good idea, but we'll see.
Press the button. Press the button.
All right, you two. Enjoy your weekend. I'm gonna let Mike go first, but
see you guys.
See you, Mike.
Have fun.
Enjoy it, and we'll talk to you next time.
You see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Aidan.
Of course.
That was a good time.
This is real fun. Have a good weekend, Ken. I'll catch you next week.
All righty. We'll see you. There goes Aidan. All right. Another one for the record books. Very cool. If you're tuned in, thank you. Appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully we'll catch you next time.